I know a lot of engineering, they don't work exactly on this field, so we'll go to other areas. I'm still not sure about exactly how in my school they make everybody work for this whole class. And I never studied before, so now I extend it and I got very interested. So
one of my friends also did civil engineering, and there's some sort of software that they use for
음악 꺼도 될 것 같은데 이제.
oh, that's like
there are some software that he uses to make some architecture and some like building architecture and civil something like that. So I guess there is some use of learning and software.
I think this is the use of programming to the majority of careers, right? It's very common.
All right, everyone. Nice to see you all here. Make yourself comfortable. We have some snacks and drinks on the bar. I'm very excited. It's great to have you all here. And I want to thank you for joining us on our very first demo day of Skapi. Right, you guys are actually the first one to see what we have been developing. Right, so I'll start from introducing myself. Let's go to the next slide. My name is Park Sa-Kim. The photo is the best I could have. This is the best what I have. My name is Park Sa-Kim. I work as a backend engineer in Skapi, also serve as a CEO of Skapi. And also, I was a former musician, music producer. I also produce a couple of famous songs in Korea that I'm really proud of. But also, since I was a kid, I was always fascinated on computer programming. So I started writing C language when I was 12. I started writing applications for Windows 95 with Visual Basics. So all the time, all my life, I always had my side programming project, despite I was working with a music producer. Right. So those side projects kind of led me to this day. This is me. Yeah, this is me when I was used to be a singer on stage. I had a couple of albums out. It's like 20 years ago. And this is me now. Right. Basic programmer. This is me back then. This is me now. Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about, as I remember when I started web developing in early 2000s, I remember things were pretty simple back then. You just had to know a little bit of PHP, a little bit of MySQL, maybe some help with Dreamweaver. You were able to host and develop a simple website, right? So, and also, nobody said nothing about you putting all the SQL queries on your GET request, right? There was no restriction at that time, and everything was just simple and it just worked. So how hard can it be to build a web application in 2023? Let's say we're just building a simple photo sharing app, okay? So as a developer, you might need to first learn about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, so you could build your front end and design your front end. And then you might need to learn Python, PHP, Java, Node.js, and so on, so you could host your HTML files over to the server. Well, that's good. And then you might need to learn about databases, right? You want your users to be able to post some data to your server, post some pictures, add some comment to other users, and your server has to be serving those data throughout your visitors of your website. So you might need to learn about how to write MySQL queries, you have to know about designing the database schemas so it could scale. And maybe you might also need to figure out how to set up your cloud storage to store the binary files, right? At this point, most front-end engineers kind of struggle. They start to struggle because it's too much to handle. But we're not even halfway there yet. What about login, logout, creating an account, restricting some security, restricting some data to be accessed from certain users. You have to learn about what JWT token is. You might need to learn how to use cookies if you're using. You might need to learn about open IDs, about hashing methods, and so on. Right, now your head starts to spin. It's too much to handle. And then what about load balancing? You might need to figure out how to properly configure your Apache server. It could be Nginx. Or probably you might need to also know how to set up your CDN. What about emails? You want your users to receive a warm, welcoming email. Thank you for signing up to our service. So you might need to set up your email systems. You might also need to be aware of SPF or DKIM verdicts and all that. And also you might need to learn about how to handle the MIME formats. It's a lot to handle for single developers to build a simple photo sharing app. And of course, we always get the Coursera. Hits us every time. Okay, so there must be a better way, right? It's like 2023, there must be a good tools out there. So number one, we have AWS, the holy grail. Everybody uses AWS, everybody loves it. It's very advanced, one of the best cloud solution out there. But sometimes you might feel like you're eating a cereal with a shovel. It could be an overkill. And moreover, about the time you finish the project on AWS, you might look like this. You might look like you have been older than 20 years than you used to be. And you're looking at right now. That's me. Okay, then what about no-code solutions like Wix? Everybody loves Wix. Wix is a great product that you could create polished website in no time, right? But the problem is you're always limited to the templates that they provide. So let's say if we're building a photo sharing app, if they don't have the template for that type of application, it might not be a best fit for us to build such project. So we'll just pass. Although I am aware of there are lots of more advanced no-code tools out there, but from my personal experience, what I felt was I was just coding with a mouse, meaning I had to relearn all their frameworks. I had to learn how all those user interfaces work. So still, it's a lot to handle. So it might not be a best fit. All right, now we have Firebase. Firebase is a solid, robust backend API service running on Jamstack methods. Firebase is good, and I love it. But I see a couple of problems when we're using API service like Firebase. The way the Jamstack is built, you end up writing more JavaScript code than you need to. So in your HTML files, you'll end up pouring all these JavaScript code in your HTML. Now, HTML elements is designed to work well. Let's say when the users want to post some data to the server, you're supposed to use form elements with input boxes, right? But since the way how the Jamstack is used, you may need to get all those HTML elements by JavaScript and then get the data from that element and then compose that JavaScript object and write the JavaScript method to send over certain data over to your server. So it becomes more and more JavaScript and less than HTML. So we're not even using the HTML the way they were supposed to design to be. So that could be a problem as well. And then you might need to reach out for certain frameworks because of this. You might want to install additional frameworks like Vue, Angular, React, and so on. And also, Firebase still needs some requirements to properly set up, configure each of your resources. You might start using database in Firebase. You might use cloud storage in Firebase. You do have to set up certain policies, some correct endpoints to make things work. So Firebase is good, but still, it does require certain configuration to make things work. So, how do we do it? I think we could do it better. We have a visitor. Hello. Right. We have a new attendee. Hello. Okay, so how Skapi does it? Skapi is a serverless backend API. And we have one focus in mind. When we're building this API, we wanted to make modern web development simple and easy as possible. So how do we do it? A couple of things here. We don't want Skapi to require any installation or any external configuration or any template. So no framework required. It's just a simple single JavaScript library that you could just import to your project. And then it should be compatible with vanilla HTML, meaning Skapi should be able to be used on static websites or SPA projects. And also Skapi should be able to use directly on the form elements to post data to your server. So you don't need to write JavaScript just to post anything to your server. And of course, we have to provide simple yet flexible database system to suit any combinations of situation for your applications. So you don't need, you wouldn't feel the need to go after additional external advanced database system like SQL. And of course, we will be providing security, CDN, cloud storage, email system just right out of the box. No setup required, no configuration required. And like I mentioned, it's running on 100% serverless, and so you don't have to worry about load balancing or scalability. All right, let's just jump right in. Simple startup. As I said, Skapi is just a single JavaScript library. You could import from your HTML headers like this. And below, we're initializing the Skapi class, giving the service ID of your service ID and the owner's ID that you could retrieve from our Skapi dashboard. And I promise you, this is all you need. Whether you start to use database or cloud storage CDN, no additional further configuration is required. That's it. From here, you could just start coding. All right, and Skapi should work with HTML form. Here we see we have a simple login form, which we have two inputs with name, email, and second one, name, password. And if the users click on submit, the form will run the onSubmit event. And we have here Skapi.login, which is the method to log users in. And with the argument, we are putting in the submit event. And this input value is going to be the data for these parameters, which meaning each of these input names will be the key names of the value for your parameters. So it's going to work, and when it's successful, it will take users to welcome.html. And with Skapi, even if you get redirected to another page, you'll be able to retrieve the resolved form response. So this is actually equivalent of doing this, right? And also Skapi, we could use it both ways. This way, we're giving a basic JavaScript object as parameters, and then we're redirecting the users to welcome the HTML. Whereas this, we are using a form and an input directly and running the method on the form on submit event. So both way works. And about databases, Skapi is schemaless design. It's auto-indexed. We design very carefully to be scalable and be flexible at the same time. So here we see this user is uploading movie data. You see on the first argument, we have Rocky 1, directory informations. And then on the second argument, the second argument is the place where you put all the index configuration for the uploading data. So here we see we're setting the table name for action movies. Access group is authorized, which meaning only the people who is logged into your service will be able to read the data. And also index. For index, we're giving a name release, and the value, of course, is going to be a release year of the movie. And additionally, we're also adding tags with some actors and actresses that is starring in the movie. So when you do this, Skapi automatically generates all the tables, all the indexes, all the index points to use with tags and all that automatically. So you don't have to pre-design your schema before you're using a database. In traditional way, you might have to think about how you would design your database. So how many tables there should be, or how many columns there should be, what kind of value type is going to be on each field, right? You don't need any of that. You just upload, and Skapi will just do everything for you. And of course, if the table doesn't exist, the table will be created. If there's no more record in the table will be deleted. Simple as that. So these type of records, you could query it by doing Skapi get records. So here, we're fetching all the action movies that is released after 1990, and Sylvester Stallone has to be in it, right? We have more of, this is very basic form of what we can do in Skapi, and we do provide more advanced indexing and querying, such as referencing, compound index names, and all that. And you could use it with any combination you want. You don't have to worry about what is the best way to query stuff, what is the best way to index certain data. You don't have to worry about that. Any combination, you can store however, whatever you want, and it will scale. Simple. All right. The next one is my favorite feature. Actually, the Skapi database and cloud storage and CDN and security are all integrated together, which means you could just directly upload your binary file to our database. In the traditional way, you have to set up separate cloud storages, maybe set up CDNs, and then you have to set up some database schema that reflects those files to fetch. But in Skapi, here we're just using a form. We're setting up some index points like table, simply my photo. Access group is private, which means only the uploader will be able to access the data. And for the data, we're just giving the input, file input. So if the user selects the file and click on submit, the file will just get uploaded with no problem at all. So when you upload, this is how the data will be saved. So in the database, it was my photo. The input name is the key name of the data. So my photo will contain all the information of the files. And then we have this, we can use this URL endpoint to download or access the file. But remember, our access group was private, right? So these endpoint will only be accessible to the user who uploaded. Nobody else, even if you have that endpoint, people will not be able to retrieve your files. And these files are served through the CDN, and the file itself will be saved in the cloud storage. So everything is figured out for you. Last but not least, we have email systems, of course. You could send out newsletters to your service users. So in this case, how we do it is usually if you see like newsletter services, you go to their website, you go to their dashboard, and they have this fancy UI to actually compose your emails, right? How we do it is we just give you unique address for send out certain newsletter to certain users. So in this case, this is the public newsletter address. So you just copy this address and then use your email provider, like in my case is Gmail. I put this address and I compose my email to be sent out to our subscribed users. And of course, we also provide these special placeholders. So hello $name, thank you for using $service name. And if I'm the subscriber of this newsletter, I will get hello Paksa. Thank you for using whatever service name you might have set up on your dashboard. Simple. And of course, we also provide automated emails. Like, let's say if the users joins in and creates an account of your service, they will get a warm welcome email. Those are automated emails. Automated emails like sending verification code, confirmation links, and all that. Those can also be all customized by using these special email addresses. All right, that's it for the slide. So we'll take a quick break, like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and I will set up my live demo so you could follow along, okay? All right. Okay, we're going to do some live coding here so you could get more better sense of what kind of service we provide. If you're going to follow along, it might be a good idea to create an account in our Skapi.com first before following along. And anybody who have not a laptop, you could just go to this site, which is currently I'm hosting on my laptop. So you could keep refreshing and see the progress of my live coding. All right. So do we all have the account in Skapi.com?
Just 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll just take 5, all right? Take your time. All right. In live demo, I'll try to build just a simple create account page, login page, and simple form that users can upload their photos. And after that, we could also see other people's photo and fetch those pictures and display it on the website. So simple stuff. So here you just have to create your HTML file just on your laptop, just basic HTML file, no installation, no frameworks, just simple HTML file. And we're going to start by importing the Skapi library. In order to do that, we could go over to our documentations, and when you go into the Get Started, we will guide you how you can import our JavaScript library. Of course, if you're building on top of Webpack-based project, such as SPA project, you could also have option to install it by npm. But for now, to keep things simple, we're just going to use basic HTML and import this script on our HTML head tag. All right. So far, so good? Right. And then what you have to do is you have to add another script tag, and you have to initialize our Skapi class. So I'm going to type this variable Skapi all in lowercase, and I'm going to type new caps S Skapi. And then now we need to create our service in our Skapi account and retrieve the service ID and owner's ID. So in order to do that, we log into Skapi, we go to the administrator page, and we can click on new service. And here you could name your service whatever you want to be. I'll name mine Photobomb. Okay, now our service called Photobomb has been created. So in this area, we see service ID and owner's ID. So all we got to do is copy and paste each of these values to be each arguments of the constructor. So first argument is going to be service ID, and second argument is going to be our owner's ID. All right. Now that's all we need. We're ready to go. I'll just put some headers here, Photobomb. And when you open up your website, you see Photobomb. Nothing happens, but you're immediately connected to Skapi service. Okay. So from the index.html, we're going to build a simple create account form. So below this, we're going to build a form. Oh, before that, we'll just kindly say create account, right? And below that header, I will create a form element, and inside the form element, we'll just keep it simple. Just put input. One is going to be the login email. I'll name this input name as an email. Of course, it would be nice to have some labels, so I'll make some labels for this input. I'll just do this. And then second label is going to be for the password. The type is going to be password. The name is going to be password. And lastly, of course, we need a submit button. So we'll just type input, and the type is going to be submit. Let's see how this look. All right, that's great. Now, in order for this form to work, we're going to add an attribute on submit directly on our form element. And we're going to run Skapi dot sign up. And inside the method, the argument is going to be event. So we just have to pass the submit event to this method. If you see in the documentations, you tried our best to explain any scenarios that you might encounter. So in authentication, creating an account, you see this method that we documented using skapi.signup. Of course, we have JavaScript option like this. You could use JavaScript way or either the form way. Both way works, but for now, to keep things simple, we're just going to use the form way. All right. Now we have on submit running the sign up method. We are prepared for the inputs with appropriate names. And then we want our users to be redirected after their successful creating account. So when they create account and when their request is successful, we'll take the users to login.html. So in the same directory, we'll create another file, which is going to be login.html. So users will be taken to this file when they create an account. And we're just going to copy this headers in login like this. And also, let's just copy this whole thing. So we are going to build a login form. Right. So this login form is going to be called please log in. Of course, the login form will take email and password as usual, but we're going to change the method names to login. So here we see in the docs, you see login. You can use login method to log users in. So I'm going to change this method name to login. We're going to pass the submit event as usual. And when it's successful, we are going to take the users to post a pic page. So we're going to name it post pic.html. All right. Now let's add another file. It's going to be post pic.html. We're going to copy these headers. And now let's try to retrieve the form response from this post a pic. All right. So users will be redirected when they log in. And in order to retrieve the data that is resolved from your calls, you simply just run skapi.getFormResponse. And every method is a promise, so the data will be resolved in then. And let's try to print this out on our website using pre-tag. I'll give an ID of info. And I'll just pass the text content to be stringified resolved data. All right, so far so good. Okay. Now let's try see if this actually works. I hope nothing is wrong here. Okay. I'll visit my website. Now it's a photobomb. So I can create an account. I'll create my account. And when it's successful, it goes to please log in. So it means account is already created. Boom. Now I may be able to log in. Let's try that. I have my password. And on submit, the login form will take me to postapic.html. And then I'll be able to retrieve the form response from JavaScript. Let's see if that's true. All right, I got this. Simple. This, when you log in, the response is usually a user object. So now we're successfully logged in, so we could create another form so users can actually post their own pictures. All right, so let's do that. I'll just leave this, comment it out. Let's build a form. So another form, just basic form. And here, I want to add inputs for, let's say, description. Oh, it's not a type. Type should be text or just not there. Name is going to be description. And we also need file input. So users should be able to select their file and post that to the database. And of course, let's build some labels. It's going to be called description. And label, another label for another input, which is going to be a file input. Post your pic. And of course, we need submit button. Let's see how this looks. All right. Now, we want this form to be posted on the database. So how do we post data to the database? We could look through the documentations and see at the database part. We could see creating a record. And here you see post record. As usual, you have JavaScript way of doing it. You have HTML form way of doing it. But as usual, we're going to use the form way of doing it. So post record, on submit, we are going to use skapi.postRecord and pass the submit event by writing event on the first argument. And for the second argument, we are just going to set up some basic index points, which is going to be a table name. I'll just name it photos. Okay. And then, when it's successful, let's take the users where they could see other people's posts. So I'm going to write cpics, okay, cpics.html. I'll create another file. It's going to be called cpics.html. And as usual, we are going to add these header scripts, right? And also, before we do anything in cpics, we want to see the resolved data when we post this data. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to print the response from post data, so we can see what we can do about it. And don't forget, every input needs a name. If you don't have a name, it won't get posted to the database. So I'll name this file to my pic, my photo. All right. So this, let's add some headers that explain what this form is. Post a picture. All right. I could put some description. Hello, everyone. And I could select some pictures. Maybe I could use this. And then if I click on submit, when it's successful, it will take me to CPICS and give me this resolved data. Now this response is actually what we have in the database now. CPICS. So here you see all this data related to the data that you just posted. And the actual data you posted is inside the data key. So in my case, I have this description, which was a string value for the input. And my photo is the file object. So you have this file information, and then you could use this URL endpoint to actually download and display the photos. And these photos will be immediately served to the CDN. So let's try that. Okay, so this is CPICS. So when we post a pic, we go to cpics.html. So what we're going to do here is going to firstly add some div. Pictures. Now we're going to use this div to put our fetched photos and listing on this div elements. Okay? So now we can fetch from the table, so we could get all the users' posts. In order to do that, when we see the documentation, we see fetching records. We call each of the data in the database records. So we're going to fetch records and Skapi.get records. Okay. Now in the first argument, we're just going to set the table of the post, which was table name photos. Table name was photos. Okay. Now since every method in Skapi is a promise method, we're going to use then and see what we get from the database. Now before we do anything, let's try to print this resolved data in the website. So I'm going to use this piece of code. Not this one, just only this part. When we get to fetch the records in the photo tables, I'm going to stringify the response and print it out into info. Okay, let's see if that works. All right, now I get the data from the database. Okay. So here, from the database response, every item from the database is within this list key. This is going to be an array, and you could iterate these lists and to do something about it. So what we're going to do here, we're going to set up some images variable And from r.list, this is going to be the each items of the images. And then we are going to iterate this images one by one. So in the each record object, you see data. That's where all the data is inside. So we'll get the comments in i.data. Oh, not the comments, descriptions. Okay, and we could have our photo URL, image URL. In the data, the file was called my photo. It's inside the my photo key. And we have to access this URL. So we have the description string value, and we have the image URL. So all we got to do is create some divs by JavaScript. We are going to create some paragraphs for descriptions. And we also need to create image element. And then we are going to set the image source to be the image URL. We are going to set the paragraph text content to be the description. And lastly, we are going to append all these image and paragraph to the div. And lastly, what we need to do is append this div to pictures. So pictures, append, div. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, somebody posted something, I think. Now we're getting some photos from the users. Who posted this? It's an ugly, I thought it was an error. Oh, okay, you just freaked me out. I thought it was something was going on. But yeah, that's cool. Let's do some CSS here because the image is too big. Style. And we're just going to set the image to be no bigger than 50% of the width. So it's more easier to see. Okay. Simple. So that's the idea how Skapi runs. There are more advanced features like security restriction and more advanced indexing. We try our best to lay out concise and clear as possible in our documentations. So you could check that out. Yeah, and that's it for the demo. Any questions? Any questions? We'll be thankful. Anything?
I have one question.
Right.
When we create an account, and you said there is all kind of services has been automatically done in the backend.
Right.
I created this account using a fake email address.
Mm-hmm.
It has been successfully created.
Yes. Right.
Is there any checks when a user is going to create an account that
Yes.
the email should be valid?
Right.
For example, I just used XYZ
Yeah.
xyz.com
Right.
and account was created.
Yes. So our approach is a great question, by the way. So our approach on this, tackle this problem is, we have an option when you create an account, we have an option to verify users. So if you see in creating an account, we have an option for sign-up confirmations, which means user has to actually confirm their emails to actually get their account created. But if you don't set this option, you could create whatever username you want. So basically, it doesn't have to be an email. So basically, it's just you're just typing a username, and you cannot stop anyone from creating usernames, right? But if you use the sign-up confirmation option, even if you have created an account with a fake email, you won't be able to get that confirmation email, right? So the account won't be created. So that's how we kind of tackle that situations. It's a really sharp questions. Yeah. Some things I also want to show you is we also have automatic login, meaning if you visit your website built by Skapi, you're always logged out. So what we want to do, you may want to automatically log in the users by setting, when you're initializing a class, on the third argument, we provide additional options. So if you do auto login to true, and if you have a history of logged in of this website, you'll be automatically logged in. And now, from this index.html, you don't want to show logged in users and asking them to create an account. So if you know that users is already have logged into your website, you could run get profile, and when you run this method, the resolved data will be null if users is not logged into your website. So you could either kick users out to some other route if they're not logged in, or you could also redirect the users. If you has a data, you could redirect to post a pic HTML. So if I have a history that I have logged into this website, I will run skapi.getProfile, and then from the resolved data, if there is a data, which means user is already logged in, and it will take the user to postapic.html because they don't need to see this create account. So if I refresh, I go to post a picture. You could do it all the way around, of course. If you find your users is not logged in, you could also check for run the get profile, and from the response, if the response data is null, that means user is not logged in. You could kick them out to the login page, and vice versa. All right, so far so good. All right.
I have one more question. In the beginning, you mentioned that like only the uploader will be able to access their photos.
Right.
Not the other person can see.
Right.
But we can see that there is a way through coding that we can see the pictures of all users.
Mm-hmm.
Just for example, I'm a Google Drive user.
Right.
And I upload my photos to Google.
Yes.
And he's also a Google Drive user, and he uploads his photos to Google.
Yes.
And I'm unable to see his photos, and he's unable to see my photos.
Right.
Until we share a link.
Yes.
But through coding, there is a way that I can, if I'm a Google developer, then there is a way that I can create a platform where I can see the photos of all users, just like you did it here.
Right.
Like iterating through the photos, writing a few lines of code and accessing the photos and iterating through the photos and displaying those photos which doesn't belong to me. It only belongs to the uploader.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, we are showing all the photos on a screen.
Right. Because we have a query that is actually fetching for all the photos from the users. But in this case, we're just calling for public posts. So if users has uploaded a private post, it won't be fetched from this query. And also, we have Also, you could actually, users can actually give access to the private record as well. So let's say I have a picture that I don't want to share with anyone, but just certain people, then I could actually give access to other users, and only those people will be able to fetch those records. So if the user doesn't fit in their access group of the records, they won't even able to be querying that record. They won't even fetch that record. Sharp questions. All right.
But in post of it, there is no access to the file. Even in post of it, there is no access to the file. If even they mentioned it, I think they can extract from here.
But he said like if the photo is uploaded as a private photo,
Like in the access group.
yeah, then we won't be able to access through coding as well. Even if the write a query, then it won't be able to display. I just got scared from this criteria. It's like it means Google also have a set access to our photos.
Yes.
Like for example, I'm a Google developer.
Yes.
And they assign me to write code for Google Photos. It means if I write 6 lines of code and then I can display all the photos of my friends who are using Google Drive.
Right. It won't happen because only the uploader decides how their privacy setting is going to be set. So it's a matter of
In a post of it, it not mention whether it's a public or a private.
Oh, this is kind of a shortcut, by the way. It's if you don't mention any access group, it's actually the public by default. So if you need more settings, you could go to access group, and you could set to private or public, etc. We have more advanced restriction options in the documentation, so you might really want to check that out. So our approach is like this. Usually if you're designing a database, you design like, hey, I want to set this policy for certain table, so certain users, certain access can only read this table. Like we have to set things up before we even use the database. But our approach is always the uploader decides. So if the uploader is set that they have a private access group, then the record is private. It can be searched, queried, and fetched from some other users. If not, if it's private, you won't even be able to find that record. Even for administrators, they could actually query the records of private records, but they won't be able to download or actually see the content of the data. So we are more forwarded to having an idea that the user is the owner of the data, not the service administrators. So that's kind of our approach.
Do you have any limitations on your database, such as Firebase? In the case of Firebase, it has some limitations of using 5 GB or 10 GB.
No.
In your case, it's
No.
unlimited.
Unlimited. You could have thousands, hundred thousands of tables. You could have whatever index you want. It will just work without no scalability issues.
Even like users, for example, 10,000 users.
No problem at all. It's designed very carefully. I have really spent my time carefully designing to be very flexible and scalable as possible. And even for cloud storages, you could actually upload like huge chunk of files, like 1 GB of file, 2 GB of file. It will always work without no problems. And those files will be served through the CDN as well.
But how are you planning to make the startup profitable? Like in the future, are you planning to run on subscription? How are people? Because now it's free, so anybody can use. What about in the future?
Right. So that's the thing. We don't have a solid plan for that yet. We need to do some beta, so we need to see how users might use our service. It could be subscription based. It could be paid per usage of your storage. It may be paid per a call, paid per network calls, or yeah. So there are several options we could go for, and But before that, we need to test the waters so we could decide the best decision for both our customers and us as well.
I have to say in the documentation there is a lot of information, which I think is great, especially for people like me because I'm still starting. So is the documentation being updated?
Yes. We will be consistently, frequently updating the documentation. We'll try our best to be more concise and more clear as possible. We'll keep working on that. Also, we're planning to renew our dashboard web pages to have more easier access, more understandable design. So currently we are at the beta stage. So there are lots more to go for us. And yeah, you could anticipate what we could come up with. We're constantly developing, and you'll see many changes in the future.
What kind of users are you going to target, like companies or some like students who want to use it for their personal projects or professional companies?
Right. Well, I could say both, but we are more focused on young developers. We are more focused on junior developers or just personal developers, freelancers, or some hobbyists just want to write some wacky apps for fun, right? So we're targeting that. The reason for that is because currently the modern web development is so complex, we have so many restrictions, it's kind of stifling the innovation. You know, the innovation comes from the kids trying out crazy stuff, you know, but nowadays when we want to build an app, we can't even start. The kid, like 15 years old kid who just learned HTML from school, in this modern age, you cannot do anything with HTML. So we are more focused on supporting those young developers and next generation of the young developers. And we're anticipating to see some very creative applications, wacky ideas, rather than going after B2B business. But although we will go after B2B business, but I can say that that's not our like solid focus right now. Right.
Would you say with the documentation we have now, would people be able to create a whole functional website with all of this documentation here?
Right. Of course. Actually, when you see in the documentation, we have a full example of photo sharing app, which has all the features that you imagine, right? So from that, you could learn how to actually build a full featureful web application. And also, of course, most of our tutorials, the examples are based on very vanilla HTML, JavaScript. So even for beginners who just finished learning HTML could actually build a functioning application. Of course, if you want more flashy, featureful front end, you might start to learn how to use SPA frameworks or build on top of the Webpack frameworks and so on. But the idea is, even if you don't know all that, you should be able to build functioning web application that just work. So you could check out the examples in here, and we'll keep updating. We'll have like photo sharing application examples. We'll have web storage application examples, and so on like that. Yeah, great questions.
This is really nice and interesting service.
Thank you.
To explore it more.
Right.
I have a curious question. Why is it called Skapi?
Oh yeah, that I had to should have mentioned it on our first page of our presentation. Actually, the Skapi name came from, it was initially Skate API. Skate API. So we wanted to build an API service that just works as if we're skating. So it became like we put that word together and it became like SKAPI. So we were initially calling like Skapi. And then that word kind of read like Skapi, so we just called it Skapi.
South Korea API.
Yeah. South Korea PAI. I never thought of that, right. Actually, nobody asked that question. Interesting.
It was the first thing I was curious about.
Wow, right. Smart audience. I'm excited. Great to be here. Okay, so I guess we have no more question, I guess. Okay, so anyways, thank you again for all participating for our very first demo day. You guys is the witnesses of this, our service. And thank you for coming by. And that's it for today. Thank you all. All right.